Welcome back to another episode of The 4 Ps. This is episode 81. So if this is the last time I get to talk to you before Bastille Day, Happy Bastille Day to everyone back in France. Most Americans assume that Bastille Day is either French Independence Day or just an excuse to celebrate all things French for a weekend. And while that's not totally wrong, this French National Day is the anniversary of the storming of the Bastille on July 14th, 1789, which, as we all know, for those who studied history, is a turning point of the French Revolution, as well as the Fête de la Fédération, which celebrated the unity of the French people on July 14th, 1790. The practical P. Are you someone who believes most of what is shared by friends or family in your social feeds? Now, this week's practical P reminds us all to inject some doubt and skepticism before liking or sharing something yourself. Maybe take a pause first. I know I am guilty of not always doing this, but that's okay. Now, I know the platforms, Facebook and the like, are on board with this too. For example, I am pretty sure baking soda injections don't cure cancer. That's why after the Wall Street Journal reported Facebook and YouTube were inundated with so-called miracle cure false medical claims, Facebook has announced plans to overhaul its algorithms to weed out misleading health information. Now, in a blog post last week, Facebook said it made 2 updates to its ranking algorithms like a month ago to limit the appearance of posts with sensational or exaggerated health claims. Now, a lot of that clickbait is aimed at pushing unsuspecting Facebookers to buy products or services that are not approved by regulators. Election meddling, it may not be great, but misleading health content is particularly bad for our community. YouTube has also said that it's taking action by cutting off advertising for channels peddling fake cancer treatments, which is, again, positive. But as Axios has pointed out, Facebook and the rest of big tech they've actually gotten pretty good at identifying scam posts from bots, but human beings driving users to snake oil fixes or, just remedies and hoaxes, those are harder to pinpoint. It gets trickier when now elected officials actually start spreading or continue spreading some of this misinformation themselves. But that requires an informed electorate to weed out those villains. Now, speaking of skepticism, the challenges that these digital platforms face now with consumer trust is also very real. 60% of Americans don't trust Facebook with their personal information, and 57% of Americans agreed with the statement that social media sites do more to divide our country than to unite it. So something personal. A few weeks ago, I suffered my second concussion in the last few years. It wasn't a glamorous or heroic story. I actually hit my head on the trunk of my car and just went down. Now, I honestly don't remember whether I talked about this previously or not, but that's actually part of the symptoms, forgetfulness. Unfortunately, this is a sign of a larger challenge that I cannot seem to solve. Aging. With age, my forgetfulness and sharpness of brain may be starting to go. Maybe it's the increased workload and priorities I have at work that have me a bit more scatterbrained elsewhere and outside the office. But a perfect example. Ready? Not once, but 2 times in the last month, I've left my credit card at a restaurant, inside the folio after signing the bill, just walking out without taking it back, then only realizing it a day or 2 later that I had left it somewhere, and then retracing my steps and remembering where I left it. I've always been able to get it back, but still, I'd never done this before in my life. So I'm not sure why all of a sudden this is something that is happening to me. Is this the beginning of some sort of early onset mental incapacity? I don't know. But please keep me honest if you think that I am starting to lose my fucking marbles. Something political. I've spent the last couple of years trying to understand the Trump supporters and their thought process and why they still like this guy in spite of everything he's done personally and professionally to put himself and his family first at the expense of all others. And what I've learned, if it doesn't affect them, they don't care. They're like him, selfish. The GOP is truly the party of me as opposed to a party of we, which is why so many of the Democratic candidates for president still appeal to me, but none more than Kamala Harris. She hasn't been as prolific with plans like Elizabeth Warren has, but it's still early and we knew they'd start coming in once the debate started. This past weekend in New Orleans at the Essence Festival, Senator Harris introduced a $100 billion program to shrink the racial gap in homeownership. Now, with this plan, the government would give grants for up to $25,000 to help Black families living in districts that have been historically redlined. And if you don't know, redlining is a discriminatory lending practice denying loans to certain neighborhoods because they're mostly minority residents. Here's why this matters. In 2017, the Black homeownership rate was 43%. The white homeownership during this time, 72%. So closing this gap reduces inequality in many ways, but it can't happen without help. And this is why the Harris for President bumper sticker is something I am proud to have on my laptop. Speaking of homes and houses, this last P, something professional, is going to be a counterpoint against one of the more prevalent trends in marketing and advertising over the past 2 to 3 years. In-housing, at least with agency-like services. Now, like many of you, I have friends and former colleagues who went to work from agencies to big brands and big companies. And after 6 months or a year, they're kind of staled out, a bit wasted after having spent all of their time focusing on one brand or one project, missing some creative diversity, getting to work on other projects, and some have already left and some are ready to leave. Keeping quality talent is going to be the biggest challenge long term, but it's also just not as efficient a model as some may have initially thought. The advanced specialization across this industry requires deep versatility within those areas and capabilities of specialization, right? And hiring the best at all of these skills is not practical. It's impossible. Sure, you want to hire generalists in some areas, you may be okay, but you certainly won't be winning across the board. So the value of agencies and external partners isn't just the visibility into best practices and permission to disrupt and break the model every so often, but also the ability to work only the number of hours on a project required and then move on to something else going on within the company. You don't get that in-house. In-house teams are forced to look busy even when they're not to justify a lot of what they're doing. Now, in-house expertise in certain areas, again, makes sense, but the pendulum is starting to swing back. We're seeing it already, and ultimately, agencies, consultancies, external vendors, and partners are in a cutthroat business that requires finding new smart ways to survive, and brands should take advantage of that. Even Jony Ive, right, Apple's longtime internal design lead, is leaving Apple to open his own shop. Apple may end up hiring them, but that's a different story. So is this going to be the catalyst that finally helps brands to realize that external partners are not only critical, but in many cases providing a more effective and efficient service model? Maybe. We'll see.